Welcome to Therapy for Nerds, the show where licensed mental health professionals use their favorite topics like TV, books, games, and movies to provide psychoeducation on mental health. Please note, this is not meant to be a replacement for mental health treatment or services. Hi, welcome to Therapy for Nerds. Cassidy here, along with.
Abby?
And today, Abby, I wanted to talk about where were you when you learned that Ash Ketchum had finally become the world champion of Pokemon?
That's funny. It's funny because I actually remember. I didn't even know you were gonna ask me that question, but I recall like it happened in Japan, right? Like it had happened prior
Mhm.
to us getting the news, and it was very late at night, and I just saw people starting posting it on Instagram, like finally, like my boy did it, like what a good way to end the series. We can all go home now. Like everyone was making commentary about it, so I did find out probably very soon after it happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was kind of the same way, probably doing like a nighttime feeding, trying to stay awake, scrolling through TikTok or whatever. Um, yeah, very much the same way.
Yeah, it was like like that one screenshot of him holding the trophy up, and like that's what everyone had on their stories. So I think it was very fulfilling for obviously for a lot of people who watched the show, but also for a whole generation of people who had been invested in Ash's story
Hmm.
since the late 90s.
Yeah. Yeah, that was something that that was the main reason why I even wanted to bring this topic up is not because of the anime, because obviously the English version isn't out yet, and I do not have the time to sit down and watch anything with subtitles right now. High School Cassidy would be so disappointed. Uh, um, but yeah, so I just it really struck me the reactions of people that I was seeing online, right? Like there were people that I were seeing that they were like, I haven't watched Pokemon in like 20 years. Why am I feeling so emotional learning that this 10-year-old boy, like I think he's actually 11, became world champion?
I mean, I think like it's a very like um classic tale, right, of the underdog story or like the hero's journey, the quest. And we all are, regardless if, I know we've talked in previous episodes about the lore of Pokemon, whether it was you were playing the game, watching the anime, collecting merchandise, like everyone knows that Ash is the protagonist or, he's the person to watch out for. And he has been doing this, right? Like forever, how long? And I think there's just like a very human innate thing, a very humanistic nature to watching people succeed. We love to watch people achieve things. I don't know why. We just do.
Yeah, especially like someone that I feel like a lot of us were invested in from childhood because a lot of us grew up watching Pokemon. I mean, Pokemon was such a huge franchise even when it first came out, like, 20 years ago. So people grew up with Ash. Ash might have stayed the same age, but people grew up around him. Uh, just and his journey was still going on, and I think a lot of people felt really stuck for a long time, and I wonder if him winning just really brought out a lot of these emotions and feeling unstuck, and my
Mm.
cat's going to join us, I guess.
Maybe
I
you
caught
had
my
my
pocket
feelings
monster.
too.
Yeah.
Feelings about Ash winning. Yeah, pretty much your cat's whole life. Ash has been trying to achieve this, so that's fair. Um, no, I agree. I think like the sense of the feeling stuck too is probably because there wasn't, and we talk about this in a lot of relationships, right? Like people are always looking for some type of closure. Like,
Mm.
are we ever going to get that closure? Are we ever going to be able to close this chapter of our lives? Sometimes when we talk about grief and loss, or when we talk about things ending abruptly, you just don't have that opportunity. And it seems like a lot of people, right, naturally, who grew up with Ash or watched the show, we're not going to stay 10 or 11 forever. We
Mhm.
ended up going to college, high school, whatever, careers, and it was never there was no fulfillment for that because it never ended for us.
Mhm. That's so true. Yeah. Yeah, just like part of our childhood was still going on, still happening, even though we were older and I mean, I was still playing Pokemon. I can like watch some of the anime, but like definitely not as watched it religiously like I did as a child.
Yeah, yeah, memorizing the Pokemon rap, I remember, was very
Yeah.
critical to my social well-being, you know.
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
it's crazy. Yeah, I think I think maybe, in the previous episode, we talked about like this nostalgic feeling, or people feeling unfulfilled about, or trying to fulfill a part of themselves with collections of toys or memorabilia and things like that. And I wonder if this is just an additional part of that. This is like collecting something, like a, not a memory, but like a, like, again, like a closure.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that word closure. Like I have so many clients where I talk to them about like, hey, what happens if you don't get the closure you want? Because chances of someone coming up and like apologizing or like you getting that closure from that relationship is pretty low in most cases.
Yeah.
Um, but then like this is finally a sense of an ending,
Mm-hmm.
which is so it's not necessarily rare in the realm of like television,
Mm-hmm.
but I guess in that form of media, it's pretty rare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like, this has been an ongoing story. There have been so many spin-offs. There have been so many side quests and tales, and I don't know if we ever really thought that it would end. You know, I
Yeah.
don't. One had really anticipated that that would happen, so it was unexpected. And you're right. Sometimes we don't get the closure that we want. But maybe we should let's talk about that a little bit, because I think it's so interesting, human nature, how we always desire closure. It's like we rarely get it, but we always want it. And why do we want it? Why do people want to have an end to something, a finalization?
I feel like because we like stories, because we like narratives that have a beginning, a middle, and then we want it to have an end.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of our lives, like we want, and we could try to use narrative therapy where we try to make our lives a story, but our lives are never going to be as neat as a story is because stories are written, they're crafted, they hit certain points, right? There's you chisel away at something until you get the best version of it. And that's not life. Life is messy, life is big, life has all these twists and turns, and you don't really know what's going to happen, and you don't have the foresight to be able to see the dominoes that are like cascading. It's
Mm-hmm.
and we can go back and try to make sense of it, and we see biopics of like people trying to make sense of this star's life or something, but it's always some part of it's always dramatized, right? Because life's not a movie as
Mm-hmm.
much as we would love it to be.
Right. Yeah, and I think that that is something that we have been sold through media and other forms. That's just, you're right, it's not accurate to what actually happens in life.
Mhm.
I actually get this a lot with my very anxious clients, or my clients that are like heavily depressed, where we discuss progress, right, in therapy. And
Yeah.
there's this sense that because life is linear, that progress needs to be linear. Like, I have to start getting better and better and better. And if I'm not consistent with that, if I'm not making this trajectory towards the top, then I'm failing. Which I think goes along with that whole thing about the narrative of like, that's what we were fed, that's what we're supposed to do, right? Or like all of these other things about, oh, like we're supposed to get married, we're supposed to have kids, we're
Oh,
supposed to,
yeah.
whatever it might be. And it's not accurate.
Just
um
putting all over yourself.
yes, exactly. And I think that everyone can relate to that in some way or some manner. I also feel like part of the reason why we want the finality, or we want that, is because we have so much we feel so nervous when we don't know what's happening, right? Like when we can't make sense of something, and when relationships end, or you see some, like, okay, like let's just use that as an example, right? Like when someone breaks up with you, it's like the rest of your story has disappeared. You thought that it was going to go a certain way, it didn't, and now you're kind of like, well, why didn't it work out the way I wanted it to work out?
Mhm.
And I can't answer those questions because I'm not the one that did this. Somebody else did it. They need to tell me what happened.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. But the chances of that other person coming in and telling you are so low. Like I've had maybe a couple of times out of all my clients where that happened, and it's not always satisfying even when it
Exactly.
does happen.
Yeah, and if when it does happen, or if it doesn't happen, they're probably never going to say anything that's going to impact you, like give you the satisfaction or the feeling that you want, because in reality, what you really want is for that relationship not to end.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. So maybe when it came to Ash, because this is like a
A
parasocial,
social relationship, yeah.
right? Yeah, like maybe the closure was so much more satisfactory because we didn't there was no expectation, right? Like the expectation was going to end,
Yeah, I
hopefully.
did not expect him to win. Like
Yeah. There,
I
there was a lot of talk about it too, because people were like, how did he beat them? Like, there's no way, like cheating, or like people thought that he cheated or some. I remember reading something like that where people were
there was
unsatisfied.
like one of the champions, there was people speculating that she threw the match or something. And I haven't seen that episode, so I can't
Yeah.
speak to that. And I'm not really interested in that. It's, and we could argue about that, but it's not really something that's
Yeah.
impactful. But what I want to go back to is what you were talking about, people wanting like this linear progression. And
Mhm.
it just made me think of how like Ash resets at every iteration,
Yeah.
right? Like the Pikachu restarting level theory that people have brought up because
Tell
Pikachu's
me about it.
getting his butt whooped by like a level 5, was it Snivy or something? But
Um,
like, and like Pikachu should be in like level 80 by
yeah.
then.
Wait,
So
right?
just the fact that, so Ash, every time there's a new generation of Pokemon, always gets sent back to the beginning, basically. I
Hmm.
think Pokemon Sun and Moon was really the first time where it really seemed like he had progressed, and people commented very early on how he was a great trainer, but he
Hmm.
still just started off with Pikachu and he had to
Right.
like, build his team from there. It's not like he had all of his Pokemon from the past.
Yeah.
So it's like when you were talking about linear progression, it just made me think of how he constantly slides back to the beginning and then has to build his way back up. And then he slides back to the beginning and then he builds himself back up. And that's so true to real life.
Right. So maybe that's even a better, like, that's a good narrative for us to, like, as therapists to use for, and as an example, because there are a lot of resets in our life. Life isn't linear. Like, we don't know what's the next thing that's going to come. And maybe that's even part of the reason why it was even so much more satisfactory when he won, because it was like, here we thought all along, like, he was starting from the beginning, and like through this one season of the show, he wasn't going to get to the end, but he did.
Yeah.
Um, and I would like to believe it was a combination of all the things that he has learned over the past 20 plus years. Hopefully, as opposed to just that one season of him like doing whatever he was doing as a trainer.
I feel like it was. I think also if you look at his progression of how far he gets in the leagues, like he's in the Indigo League, he ends at like 16th place, and then in the later leagues he gets like eighth, like, and then he's building. So that's another thing that I think is very true to like real life and recovery is it's not linear, it's not linear, but you still have like there's still peaks and ups and downs, but overall, like the general curve is up, right?
Yeah.
Like he's getting better and better and better. He's getting further and further in the league until he
Yeah.
finally wins.
Yeah. And that's like a lot of my clients, we talk about that too, because they tend to not see the progression, right? Like what I say is like you're in the thick of it. Like you can't see what's happening around you because you are it. Like you're the middle.
Mm-hmm.
But in the same way that we talk about timelines, like life is time is linear. We're not linear in regards to our progression, but time is linear, which means that we're constantly moving forward. And even if you don't make any progress today, you are one day further away from whatever that thing was that was bothering you, or the thing that the time where you had identified whatever the issue is. So
Mm-hmm.
I constantly tell people, yes, you are making progress. Even if you don't see it, even if you don't feel it, you're moving forward physically with time. So yeah, I think that maybe it's good that we're able to identify those things, especially with Ash's story of like, hey, he was 16th, now he's 8th, now he's 7th, whatever it might be. And even if they had played it differently, where he was like 16th place and the next one he was 24th place, he still probably gained a bunch of knowledge from all the people that beat his ass. Oh man.
Yeah, that is very true. I'm almost more interested because they announced that there's going to be like a final mini series of him going back and like meeting all of his companions and everything, and like I'm really interested in what that closure season looks like.
Mm-hmm. Well, what would you want it to look like?
I don't know. Like I don't know what I legitimately do not know what I would want from it.
Mm-hmm.
Um like I want to see how all of the companions are doing. Like I'm not invested in all the companions because I like I said I kind of came in and out of the anime depending on if it was how much time I had
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. Yeah.
Uh and but I'd still be interested in seeing like where he kind of leaves off with all of them and what he decides to do after. Because oftentimes we have these big goals and these big dreams, and narrative wise, the story ends after we
Mm-hmm.
reach them, but life doesn't end after we reach those goals.
100%. Yeah.
So, what do you do with your after?
Yeah, and I'm not an expert in this like area of psychology, but I think that's part of the reason why there are so many people who are very, otherwise very successful, very rich, very powerful, high positions in their jobs, and they're very unsatisfied with themselves because it's like, I did the thing, now what?
Hmm.
So I think it's important, right? Like as we are starting to scaffold or kind of identify what our goals are, whether that's mental health goals, physical goals, work goals, school goals, career, it's important for us to also identify and imagine ourselves in that position and what we want from that, right?
Hmm.
I think that a lot of people miss that part. It's kind of cute though. Like I kind of like the idea that they're gonna to have this mini series. It's almost like when you have reality TV and they like do the reunion show or whatever. Um, so maybe we'll have these little like synopsises of people like, oh, I started to garden and like I started a I don't know Pokemon training business. Um, that also again right going back to the closure. We want closure not only for Ash but for all the other people who were a pivotal role in his his way to becoming a Pokemon champion.
Yeah, his story intertwined with so many other people.
Yeah.
And it's like the closure we got from him was amazing. It would be
Mm-hmm.
great if we could get similar with the other people, the other
Mm-hmm.
stories that are intertwined,
Yeah.
and see how they kind of deal with their afters.
It's interesting too because I'm more of like a Pokemon movie person than a Pokemon series person. But there's always characters within those movies that are like they look up to Ash, even though at that point he wasn't even a Pokemon master or like really far in his training most of the times, right? Like like you said, he restarts.
Yeah.
People like were influenced by this person and their determination to reach their goals. And
Mhm.
I think that again, going back to real life people, that maybe sometimes we have to acknowledge that too, the impact that we have on people, not negatively but positively by just existing. um my clients tend to forget that too. I don't know if you hear this a lot, but especially from my clients I hear a lot of like, I'm a burden, like I'm really depressed, it's hard for me to make my own lunch or whatever it might be, and like they tend to always focus more on the fact that they can't do stuff versus like the things that they are doing for themselves.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's totally something I've seen with a lot of my clients is that the focus on the negative, the focus on what they can't, the focus on the shoulds that they the things that they should be doing. And it's like, well, do you have to do the thing? Because
Right.
it doesn't seem like it's impacting you. Like, well, it is not
Yeah.
the right word, but it's
Yeah.
like it overall, will it impact you if you don't get married, if you don't go to college, if you don't do all these things that they say you should be doing?
Hmm.
There's so many other ways to live your life.
Yeah, the story has not been written. If we're talking about the narrative, it's still open ended until you decide to close it.
Mhm.
So, well, thank you, Ash. Thank you for setting the bar and being an example for all of us. That even though you were supposedly supposed to be a Pokemon master within however long, maybe one series, two series, it took you 25 years and you're still here.
Oh man. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely it's admirable how he goes, how he like he had such a big dream and how he worked so hard to make it true.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that because all all of us have dreams that we're striving for. I know you and I, like, we dreamed of becoming licensed, now we are, and it was definitely one heck of a journey for me. I bet it was for you too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes, we might have goals in mind, but we might not know what it looks like to get there. And it's okay if you're like stunned or shocked or unhappy with the things that you need to go do and to get to your goal. I think that's a very common misconception that you're supposed, because you want this thing so badly, that you need to enjoy or be okay with the things that you need to do to get it. And no, it's not always glamorous, it's not always beautiful, and you're not going to wake up every day loving your life just because you want something. It's okay to not be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Thinking
rough.
of all the
Yeah.
hard times, yeah.
Yeah, so that's probably something we'll talk about probably more in the future. I'd love to hear from, like, I don't know if people can like comment or leave us a message, but I would love to hear how people feel about that, about whether or not they doubt themselves or how much they want something because of their dissatisfaction or where they are in the process.
Mm. I'd be interested in hearing that too. I know I went through a period of really doubting my
Oh,
choices.
yeah.
Uh,
Even being licensed, sometimes it's not what I thought it was going to be, right? Because I'm naive little 20+ year old like,
oh
oh
yeah,
yeah,
right.
practice is great, and sometimes it's not.
Yeah, I don't know what I was expecting. I feel like I applied for grad school on a whim.
Hmm.
And I jumped immediately from undergrad to grad. So
Okay.
this is my only career, whereas a lot of people I know in the field, it's like their third, fourth, fifth.
It's interesting. Everyone has a different journey, and I remember I had a colleague who was an actor prior, and he had told me that on average people switch careers 3 times in their life.
Yeah, I've heard that before too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just like, wow, that's so amazing and fascinating. But also, we never, like, going back to the narrative, we were never told that that was okay. People just tell you, oh, 18, you better pick a job, pick a career for the rest of your life, and that's what you're gonna do. Um, yeah, we never know where it's gonna end up. Maybe you end up going somewhere else, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. And that's definitely a topic of many of my clients since I see a lot of like high school teenagers, going into college and what should my major be? Where should I go? Blah blah blah. And like you can go to community college, you could go to whatever school you want to do. You don't have to do some big expensive one, and you don't have to do business, you don't have to do mechanical engineering. Like do what you want to do. But I mean, an 18-year-old, I feel like we have a lot of big expectations on them, and that's such a young age. None of them know what they want to do. Maybe like 1% of them know what they want to do.
I mean, that prefrontal cortex is not even like fully developed yet, so you can't
Not
really
even
say, right? Like,
Yeah, it's not even close.
and here we are, like praising Ash, 10 years old, 11 years old, freaking over the whole world, like very unrealistic. That was very unrealistic of you, Ash. You're setting a bad example for us.
Well, he's every employer's dream, right? Like
Right?
he's a master.
Oh my god.
He's a 12-year-old with 20 years experience
Like every job,
in
right?
the
The
world. Yeah,
starting position, 5 years experience.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, like, I'd love to hear, like, from this conversation. I think we could have gone like a million different ways. And please, like, whoever is listening, if you want more information about one of the things that we talked about, or it sparks something else, please reach out to us. We're more than happy to expand. We have a lot to say. Not a lot of time, but a lot to say. So,
Yeah, definitely. And I'd be interested in hearing other people's like journeys and how they make sense of it, and
mhm.
if Ash helps them make sense of it too.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot. Okay, so like, just Ash is not the only one, right? Like, there are a lot of people that we look up to, both not figuratively, fiction in fiction, as
Yeah.
well as in real life. So what is it about their journeys that are inspiring to, you know, the people out there listening?
Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please comment, like, subscribe, and follow us on social media. Remember to be kind to yourselves this week.